doing the inner work, you are bringing things back into wholeness that were not in wholeness. As you do that, you also create more resilience. You're more resilient to life's challenges. You're more resilient to rejection. Resilience that's being built as a result of unraveling. This is what most people would call grounded. It's not as simple as go do breath work. It's not as simple as go pray even. Like, it's not that simple. There's resilience. And then this last is purpose and alignment. How intense are your triggers these days? When you track your triggers in relation to a person, is my relationship to them or the thing that's triggering me shifting? Because the only reason you need resilience is when things aren't going great. Yo, what's up everyone, and welcome to this very special episode of Stay Grounded. This one is a really beautiful milestone. You know, since I would say my whole adult life, I've been passionate about personal growth and development. You know, I started the podcast back in 2017. Brought on experts from all walks of life to really help me learn how I could be more grounded. And then that journey took me down a path of exploring deep technologies like psychedelics and Vipassanas and deeply transformative therapeutic protocols that opened up a world of the inner work. And then for years, that became my passion of how do I learn to navigate my life with more ease and grace, and how do I learn to live the most authentic expression of my life? Because I realized that, you know, the inner work is very different than therapy. The inner work is very different than a massage. The inner work is very different than self-care. You know, to me, the inner work is about becoming the most grounded version of yourself you can be versus just creating moments of groundedness in your day. And over the years, you know, I've released over 400 podcast episodes, had conversations with some of the most brilliant specialists and experts in the field of the inner work, whether it's trauma, mental health, spiritual development, emotional well-being, relationships, purpose, you name it. And then I also launched a company called Liberate, where we created programs for us to research, test, and understand what tools, what modalities, what frameworks, what teachings, what books are most impactful for people doing the inner work. And we've collected hundreds of thousands of data points. And as a result of all of this, now I feel like I have a really good understanding of what it actually means to do the inner work. Why do the inner work? What is the actual end result that we are trying to get to as a result of devoting ourselves to deeper practice? And that's what we talk about on this week's episode. We talk about the different forms of resilience, which is really where I feel the inner work is helping us get to, deeper forms of resilience and the different kinds of resilience, and why it's important to look at yourself through the lens of different types of resiliences and the benefit you can get by doing so. And so I'm excited for this conversation. Alex, welcome back.
Absolutely.
Great to be here, brother.
Excited to talk about this today.
Yeah, it's a deeply important conversation because, you know, there's just so much noise in the world of mental, emotional, spiritual, nervous system, and relational health. In fact, even just saying all that, right?
A lot of word salad.
That's what I'm saying. It's a lot of word salad. A lot of word salad. It's because it's not just working on your mental health. Mm-hmm. Right? If it was just your mental health, then therapy would be fine. You can go to cognitive behavioral therapy. You're just working on your mental health. You're just working on your beliefs, and you should be making progress, right? But most people stay stuck in the same. They might feel better, but they're not actually progressing in transformation. I believe that the inner work is about transformation. You can transform yourself into a more resilient human being, into a more authentic human being, into a more loving human being. If there are qualities about yourself that you don't like, I guarantee you there is a set of practices and protocols that you can follow to transform that so it's not a part of your identity anymore. And so inner work is in some ways correlated with inner transformation work. And it's also correlated with a lot of healing because, again, doing the inner work as you embark on that path, you are bringing things back into wholeness that were not in wholeness.
Mm-hmm.
Traumas, beliefs about yourself, whatever was created to that brought you away from your own light, your own divinity, your own spark, all of that gets to wither away and fall. And as you do that, you become a more natural, aligned, alive human being.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found is that as you do that, you also create more resilience. You're more resilient to life's challenges. You're more resilient to rejection. You're more resilient to failure. You're more resilient to conflict. You're more resilient to uncertainty. So there's resilience that's being built as a result of unraveling. And so what we've discovered at Liberate is what the most effective thing to track and measure is resilience. And there's different types of resilience that we can track and measure.
Mm-hmm.
And there's different progress milestones for us to know, okay, like, am I actually becoming more resilient in this department? Right? Like, so the first bucket would be your nervous system resilience. So this is your body's capacity to regulate in stress, right? So you're in a stressful moment, you're in heightened state. Can you actually bring yourself back into a state of rest, of calm, of centeredness? This is what most people would call grounded.
Mm.
How can I get grounded? How can I stay grounded? These are where the breath practices and the tracking of heart rate variability. Like, there's a lot of metrics we can track to really measure nervous system resilience, right? But then there's also your mental resilience, which is your mindset, right? Which is not your nervous system. It's not your capacity and the skill you've developed. It's like more about your inner critic and your beliefs about the world, your beliefs about health, your beliefs about relationship and love, your beliefs about your own internal capacity to create change, your belief in your body, your belief in God. All of those beliefs and those mental constructs and your ability to be aware of yourself and this ability to be self-aware, that's a form of resilience, right? Because if you're unaware and you have very low mental resilience, you're not even gonna realize the cage you've created for yourself. But as you increase in mental resilience, you're more aware of your parts, your patterns, your triggers, and you're starting to see the interconnected web of them. So that's a form of resilience, right? And then there's emotional resilience,
Mm-hmm.
which is the ability to understand your emotion. This is where, vulnerability, your emotional expression, your ability to really understand what you're feeling and then put words to them. Your ability to feel your emotions willingly, the ability to allow emotion to move through your system, and so like there's a level of emotional resilience, and the more you practice that, the more resilient you become to negative experiences and emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have a healthy relationship with anger versus an averse, right? So having an averse relationship to anger would be low emotional resilience, because anytime you have an experience that creates anger, you're now stuck in a cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not resilient. But then if you shift your relationship to anger, now all of a sudden you have a healthy relationship to it. So when something shows up and you create anger or you experience anger, now you're more resilient. So it's the emotional. And then the next is your creative and your intuitive, your spiritual resilience in some ways, which is your the frameworks, your ability to reframe experiences and from things happening to you to things happening for you.
Mm-hmm.
Your ability to forgive, your ability to access deep insight and creativity, your ability to move from again that victim energy, which would be low spiritual resilience, to a higher form of spiritual resilience, which is your creational capacity and your alignment with divine and your source, right? That would be another form of resilience. Then the fifth would be relational resilience, which is how are you in your relationships? Your capacity to have hard conversations, to be adept at navigating skillfully conflict, to setting boundaries, to advocating and being able to read a room and feel all of that, because your relationships are your biggest sources of stress. So when you actually start to think about chronic stress, it's not as simple as mental health. It's not as simple as go do breath work. It's not as simple as go pray even, right? Like it's not that simple. There's resilience. And then this last is purpose and alignment. You know, are you doing things in alignment? Are you acting against the deep integrity, your values? Are you living in alignment? Because what we find over and over again is people who are not living in alignment are also increasing greater levels of chronic stress.
Mm-hmm.
So when we start to really assess, okay, the inner work, like what we found is assessing it across these different categories of resilience allows us to actually see where somebody is in their journey.
Mm-hmm.
And this allows us to then know what tools, what modalities, what resources are best for each individual. And this is the stuff we create inside of our Liberate program. So anybody who signs up for a program, this is what we're doing. We're tracking where you are, establishing the baseline, and then we're saying where you can go next.
That's awesome. So you're thinking about resilience, you're thinking about the inner work has evolved to equate more to resilience as a whole.
Yeah, it's a metric, right? And resilience is that's why resilience, if I think of the bucket, it's like, yes, there's the objective measures we could be tracking, right? Like the HRV, like your even your glucose.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's lots of things you can track objectively. Your sleep. You know, there's many things we can track. You can do functional testing to see cortisol levels. Like there's all that, right? But then there's also skill development. Like, what is your ability to reframe a difficult experience? How quickly?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how intense are your triggers these days? Like when you track your triggers in relation to a person, let's say it's your mother or your father, you know, or your spouse, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you track, okay, like this is where I was on day one. Like the more interactions I have with them, like is my relationship to them or the thing that's triggering me shifting? That's what I would be tracking in the inner work, but really that's a form of relational resilience because it's improving your relationship quality, and it's a form of mental resilience because it's helping you see your own patterns. So when I see it like that, it's like it's all skill development, it's objective tracking, and then it's like how many frameworks and perspectives can you master in each of these departments and realms to become the most resilient version of yourself that you can be to things, because the only reason you need resilience is when things aren't going great.
Right.
When
are they always going great?
That's my point. So it's like the reason you do the inner work is so you can create a more authentic life. But a big part of creating an authentic life is actually being resilient to everything that's not.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so that resilience to everything that's not is so important to then protect the authentic, vibrant, liberated signal that is you. And then being able to live from that space because you have structure, resilient structures all built around it is a big part of how you can begin to master self.
Mm-hmm.
Master self. You know, like this is, and I'm still trying to figure out what is the inner work in all these departments? Is it psyche health? Is it, it's not, it's like, I don't know the word for it yet. It's not mental health. It's not even emotional health. It's not nervous system health. It's not spiritual health. It's not relational health. There's something else that wants to emerge here. It's just, it's your consciousness.
Yeah. Attunement.
Yeah. It's just your way of being health, right? Like it's your way of being health. And that is also interconnected to everything in your life, right? Because you're the common denominator, right? So like I can list out the hundreds, if not thousands of research papers that exist on the links between chronic stress and illness. There's so much evidence on the role of chronic stress and the impact on relationships,
mm-hmm.
chronic stress and the impact on career. Like when you start to just see the interconnected system. And so, yeah, at Liberate, we're really passionate now about really mapping each of these and understanding. And then what we find is, your biggest upside is going to be on working in the space where your resilience is the lowest. You know, like some people, we have so many people that I've met over the years that are deeply spiritual. Oh my God, they've done all the plant medicine work. They can connect to visions. They can see, like they're so high and out, right? But they're not grounded. They're not in their bodies, right? Like you can feel the disassociation from their bodies, which is where they're going. So for them, it's like, no, we need to get your nervous system grounded. We need to get you in the emotional layer. Like that's like more where your work is, right? So this is why you could be doing all the spiritual work in the world and still manifest illness. And then you'll be shocked, but it's like, no, like if we actually look at the whole system, there's these other forms of resilience that aren't strong enough to withstand the depth of chronic stress that's likely operating in the background. And so, yeah, I guess when I think about it, you know, doing the inner work is really about becoming the most grounded, resilient version of yourself to things that are not true, which could be relationships, which could be work, which could be conversation. It's like everything. And because you've increased your depth of self-advocacy, which is a form of resilience, right? Your sense of self, this is the mental resilience. How do you see yourself? How do you believe in yourself? Like that mental resilience. Like as you do that, you naturally begin to see a new world, a new set of possibilities. And that's ultimately why we do the inner work, you know, to end up there. And it's very different than therapy, very different than plant medicine. It's very different. This is the integration work. This is the real deep inner transformation work.
It's the being work. It's like the day-to-day, how you're living your life.
Yeah, it's the being work. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Maybe it's a being health. I don't know. We'll have to think about that. But anyways, yeah, I'm excited about this because this has, again, been rooted in so much research.
Yeah.
And we're getting ready to create, we actually just launched a new assessment that anybody who's listening can go on the Liberate website and purchase. It's $97. And you can use the code SG15 to get 15% off. But basically it's a comprehensive assessment to see where you are in your inner work journey. So we assess across all of these resilience categories, and then we give you a score, and then you get a consultation with someone on my team to help really navigate, okay, like out of all the things in the world, this is where you focus. Here's your plan. Go. And it's a really impactful way for you to get really clear on where you're at and establish a baseline. And then, especially if you're navigating stuckness in your life, if you're navigating stuckness or you're not sure, you have too much noise, like this is a really great place to start. And so you can head to liberate.health/assessment. And yeah, that's what we've got right now.
Excited to take it.
Yeah, this is what's so beautiful, you know, like before I was doing everything intuitively with my own reflection processes, and like I was learning a lot, but now to have it all grounded in research and data and science and results, it just changes the game, man. Like having that at Liberate just allows for so much more refinement of tools. So I'm excited. I'm excited for this tool to be something that people can use to get to know themselves a lot better. It'll take you about 30 minutes to complete, and it's a very insightful test where you'll learn a lot about yourself. And the consultation on the back end is even more impactful because you're going to get somebody who's been supporting and navigating and seeing these data trends to help clarify the next steps for you. So
I love it. I love what you're building.
Thanks, brother.
It's cool.
Appreciate you. Yeah, no, and I love this. This is a really, this is fun for me to talk about. Actually, I'm glad we decided to talk about this today. Because it's, even saying it out loud, I'm like, being health. Huh, that's interesting. I got to think with that. Maybe that's what it is. It's like your something along those lines. Okay. Anyways, everybody, that's a wrap for this week's episode of Stay Grounded. I'm your host, Raj. This is your old friend, Alex. And from us, stay grounded. We'll chat soon. Thanks so much for joining us today on this week's episode of Stay Grounded. I hope it was helpful for you in accessing deeper insights and wisdom into your own way of being. If you're on an inner journey and want deeper insights from my own, head to my newsletter at rajjana.com/stay grounded to access my weekly, sometimes more than weekly, email update. This is a space where I can be much deeper, much more vulnerable, and share a lot more about what's happening day to day in my life that I don't get to share on the podcast. And so if you've been impacted by the podcast and want to build a deeper relationship with me, head to rajjana.com/stay grounded to join the newsletter. I can't wait to see you there. See you next week.